My name is Dr. Maya Carter. I live in a high-rise condo overlooking Lake Michigan, drive a sleek black car I paid for in full, and run a thriving medical practice in downtown Chicago. People see the white coat, the framed diplomas, the confident walk, and they think I've had it all figured out my whole life. They don't know the truth. In this story, I'm going to share my life story. Please subscribe to stay updated on our daily family revenge stories. Like to keep the video a wide reach. They don't know about the girl who used to eat dinner alone at a kitchen table while her family laughed in the living room. The girl who studied by flashlight because no one bothered to fix her bedroom lamp. The girl who was invisible in her own home. I'm not bitter, not anymore. But I'd be lying if I said the past doesn't live in me. Some scars never fade, no matter how high you climb. Last Friday night, I was sipping tea in my living room, watching the skyline flicker through the glass, when my phone rang, unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, call it curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me pick up. It was my mother, 7 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard her voice. And in that one moment, all the distance, the silence, the forgotten birthdays and ignored milestones came rushing back like a wave I thought I'd outrun. Maya, she said. Her voice small. Your brother's in trouble. He's been drinking again. Lost his job. He's sick. And your father, he's not well either. We need help. I didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the city lights blinking outside my window, because here's the thing about the past, it always finds a way back. And mine? Mine was calling me home. I grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't the worst place in the world, but it wasn't exactly warm either, not emotionally, anyway. We were a family of 4, my dad, a mechanic who came home smelling like grease and sweat, my mom, a part-time cashier who always seemed tired, my older brother, Jordan, and me. From the beginning, Jordan was the center of our universe. He had this loud, charismatic energy that drew people in. Even as a kid, he knew how to get what he wanted. He was the kind of boy who got away with everything, skipping homework, picking fights at school, lying about where he'd been. But no matter what he did, my parents found a way to excuse it. He's just spirited, my mom would say when he came home with bruised knuckles and a call from the principal. He's got potential, my dad insisted when Jordan brought home yet another report card full of CS and DS. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I kept to myself. I read constantly, anything I could get my hands on. I did my homework without being asked. I followed the rules. I thought if I was good enough, I'd earn their love, too, but good girls get overlooked. Especially when their brothers set the house on fire and still get praised for their spark. I remember once, I was 9, I spent a whole week building a solar system model for the school science fair. I used wire hangers, foam balls, paint, and fishing line. I even printed little name tags for each planet. When I won first place, I came home grinning, holding the blue ribbon in both hands like a trophy. My mom glanced at it, nodded, and said, "That's nice, honey," before asking Jordan if he wanted pizza rolls. Another time, in 7th grade, I got selected to represent my school in a citywide math competition. It felt like a big deal, at least to me. I told my dad over breakfast, beaming with pride. He didn't even look up from the paper. "You always liked that nerd stuff," he mumbled, turning the page. By contrast, when Jordan got picked to play second string on the high school football team, my parents threw a cookout. They bought a banner, invited neighbors, grilled hot dogs like he'd been drafted by the Bears. Even when Jordan messed up, which was often, it was like the world bent over backwards to forgive him. One summer, he broke a neighbor's car window while throwing beer bottles with his friends. I thought for sure he'd finally face consequences, but no, my dad paid for the damages and said, at least he wasn't out stealing. My mom made him lasagna that night, his favorite, and me? I was left with silence. No celebration for my perfect attendance. No cheers when I made the honor roll. No one came to parent-teacher night, not once. It wasn't just what they did for him. It was what they didn't do for me, they didn't see me, and over time, I stopped trying to be seen, I withdrew more. Spent hours in the library after school, reading and finishing homework just to avoid going home. My teachers loved me. They encouraged me, told me I could do anything I set my mind to. It was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. I started dreaming of something bigger, of becoming a doctor, someone who could help people, someone who mattered. I remember the night I told my parents I wanted to go into medicine. I was 15, sitting at the kitchen table with my chemistry textbook open in front of me. I think I want to be a doctor, I said softly. My dad laughed. Not a chuckle, a full guttural laugh that echoed off the linoleum tiles. Why would you want all that stress? He said, shaking his head. That's not for girls. Be a nurse. Or a teacher. That's more reasonable. My mom nodded in agreement, already back to folding laundry like I hadn't just bared my heart. That night, I cried into my pillow. Not because they discouraged me, I was used to that. I cried because, deep down, I still wanted them to be proud of me, but they weren't. Not then. Maybe not ever. The emotional toll of always being second best, or not even ranked, was heavy. I stopped sharing good news. I stopped trying to win them over. I built walls. Brick by brick, year after year, and even now, when I walk through the polished halls of my clinic or feel the weight of the stethoscope around my neck, I still hear that voice in my head. Why would you want all that stress? Because, Dad. Because I could. Because I did, because I had to prove, even if only to myself, that I was always worth it. High school was when I truly began to dream, not just vague, childish dreams, but sharp, determined goals that I could picture clearly. I wanted to become a doctor. Not for the title, not for the money, but because science fascinated me. Biology, anatomy, chemistry, I loved it all. I loved understanding how the body worked and how people could be healed. I saw a future where I could help others and maybe even escape the world I felt trapped in. I joined the science club. I shadowed the school nurse during lunch periods. I took extra classes, begged teachers for advanced material, and spent weekends watching surgery documentaries online. That was who I was, curious, driven, hopeful. One afternoon, I came home clutching a brochure for a summer medical program at Northwestern for gifted high school students. It wasn't free, but I had already been offered a partial scholarship because of my GPA and teacher recommendations. I remember sitting across from my parents at the kitchen table. My heart was pounding. This could be the first step, I said, trying to steady my voice. If I get through this, I can apply to Northwestern later. They look at applicants from this program. It's a real opportunity. My mom looked at the cost on the form and wrinkled her nose. That's a lot of money, she muttered. It's a scholarship. I just need help covering the rest, I replied. My dad didn't even glance at the paper. What's wrong with nursing? He asked. You'll still help people. Besides, Jordan might need help registering for his fall classes. Jordan wasn't even in school. He had already dropped out of community college. Said he needed time to find himself. But of course, my parents bought it. They always bought it. That summer, Jordan crashed my dad's old car while drunk driving. No one was hurt, but the repairs wiped out any extra money we had. I never got to go to the program. I told myself I'd find another way. And I did. But the message was clear. Jordan's mistakes would always come before my dreams. He continued drifting. Started hanging around older guys from the neighborhood who were always in trouble. He stopped coming home some nights. Showed up late for dinner smelling like beer or weed. My parents scolded him gently, never yelled. Never set boundaries. He's going through a rough patch, my mom would say. He just needs time, my dad insisted. Time. Excuses. Bailouts. They gave Jordan all of it, and me? I kept my head down and worked. I poured everything into my classes, holding on to the belief that maybe, just maybe, hard work would finally pay off. Then came senior year. I was nominated for the citywide Academic Excellence Award, only one student per school. It was the biggest honor of my life. The ceremony was in a downtown auditorium. Students from across Chicago would be there with their families, dressed in their best, walking across the stage to receive their plaques. I bought a simple black dress with money I made from tutoring. I printed 2 extra invitations for my parents. I left them on the kitchen counter with a sticky note that read, "Please come." It would mean a lot. The night of the event, I scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Nothing. I walked across that stage alone. I smiled. I shook hands with the superintendent. I held the heavy plaque in both hands and looked out into the sea of proud families, but no one clapped for me. I took the train home with the plaque in a plastic bag, sitting beside strangers, fighting the lump in my throat. When I walked through the front door, my dad was on the couch watching TV. Jordan was laughing at something on his phone. "I got the award," I said, quietly. "That's good," my dad mumbled, eyes still on the screen. "What's for dinner?" And that was it. That night, I sat in my room, holding the plaque and wondering if they'd even remember this moment in 5 years. I knew then that whatever I became in life, it wouldn't be because of them, it would be in spite of them. They had made it clear. Jordan was the golden child, no matter how often he failed. And me? I was just there until one day I wouldn't be. When I got the acceptance letter from Northwestern University, I sat on my bed and read it 3 times, just to make sure it was real. "We are pleased to offer you admission." It felt like a door cracking open into a future I had only dared to imagine. I had worked relentlessly for this moment, late nights, missed parties, endless hours buried in textbooks and lab reports. I earned a partial scholarship, which covered tuition, but not room and board, textbooks, or living expenses. Still, I believed, naively, that my parents would be proud. That maybe this would be the moment they finally saw me. I waited until dinner that night, heart pounding in my chest, to share the news. "I got in," I said, holding up the letter. "Northwestern. I'm going to study pre-med." My mom blinked at me from across the table. "Oh. Northwestern's expensive, isn't it?" "It's a partial scholarship," I explained. "I just need some help covering the rest, maybe some help with rent or groceries while I get settled." My dad didn't even pretend to consider it. "We can't," he said flatly. "Jordan's trying to get back on track. He might go back to school in the fall. We need to support him." I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. That night, I sat in bed with the acceptance letter pressed to my chest, feeling both elated and gutted. The future was within reach, and yet, I had to chase it alone. So I left. I packed my thrift store suitcase, kissed my little bookshelf goodbye, and moved into a cramped dorm room with 2 strangers and no safety net. I took out loans, applied for financial aid, and got a job waitressing at a diner 2 blocks from campus. Eventually, one job turned into 2. By day, I balanced lectures, labs, and clinical hours. By night, I scrubbed office bathrooms and vacuumed floors. On weekends, I worked doubles at the diner. I was always moving, always exhausted. I lived on black coffee, granola bars, and frozen meals. I lost weight. My hands trembled from exhaustion during exams. There were nights when I cried silently in the back room of the restaurant during my break, tears soaking into my apron as I reminded myself to just keep going. No one called from home. No birthday wishes. No "how are you?" No care packages or gas money or surprise visits. I could have disappeared, and they might not have noticed. The loneliness crept in like fog, thick, heavy, and quiet. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't have time. My world became a loop of study, work, sleep, repeat. One night during sophomore year, I collapsed in the library. I had been awake for 36 hours. I was running on nothing but caffeine and willpower. My body gave out, just crumpled like paper between the shelves of the science section. That's when I met Dr. Eileen Watson. She was a senior lecturer in biology, known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude. She had taught one of my first-year classes and remembered me. She drove me to the hospital herself. "You're burning yourself out, Maya," she said gently, sitting beside me in the ER. "You're one of the brightest students I've seen in years, but you can't do this alone forever." I broke down in front of her, ugly sobs. I hadn't let myself cry in months. That night was a turning point. Dr. Watson became my unofficial mentor. She helped me apply for grants and work-study positions that paid more with fewer hours. She introduced me to free counseling services and taught me how to advocate for myself. She even slipped me a grocery gift card once, pretending it was a faculty freebie she didn't want to waste. She never pitied me, just supported me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. The years passed in a blur of textbooks, hospital rotations, and caffeine. I made it through organic chemistry, anatomy labs, and endless hours in the clinic. I studied harder than I thought possible. I worked until I couldn't keep my eyes open. And somehow, I endured. By senior year, I was at the top of my class. When graduation came, I bought my cap and gown with pride. I walked across the stage in front of thousands. They called my name, Dr. Maya Carter, summa cum laude. The auditorium erupted with applause. I looked out into the crowd. I searched for familiar faces, hoping, even then, that maybe they'd come, but there was no one, no mom with tears in her eyes. No dad trying not to cry. No brother filming on his phone, just empty seats and strangers clapping. I smiled anyway, because in that moment, I realized something important. They weren't there, but I had survived. I had earned every step of that walk. Every honor, every syllable of doctor. Every scar, and while they had abandoned me, I had never abandoned myself. While I was busy building a life on my own, Jordan's was slowly unraveling. I heard bits and pieces over the years, mostly through occasional gossip from old neighbors or mutual acquaintances I'd run into in the city. He never went back to school. The rough patch my parents insisted he was in became a lifestyle. At first, it was just the usual, late nights, partying, drifting from one low-paying job to the next. He moved back in with my parents by the time he was 24, citing bad luck and bad bosses as the reasons for every firing. He always had a story, some excuse that sounded just believable enough. Then came the drinking. He started early in the day. By evening, he'd be passed out on the couch or shouting at the TV. He racked up 2 DUIs before he was 30. One time, he got into a fight outside a bar and ended up spending a night in jail. Another time, he crashed into a mailbox and blamed the ice. Though the weather report said it had been 60 degrees that day, still, my parents refused to see the truth. "He's just stressed," my mother would say. "He's been through a lot. He's a good boy deep down," my dad insisted. "He just needs the right opportunity." Even as their savings dwindled to cover court fines and hospital visits, even as neighbors whispered and the police showed up at their door more than once, they clung to the same broken narrative. Jordan wasn't failing, life was just unfair to him. They enabled him at every turn. Cleaned up his messes. Paid his rent. Bought his lies. And all the while, they never once reached out to me, not even to ask how I was doing. It was like I didn't exist, until the day came when Jordan spiraled so far they couldn't ignore it anymore, and suddenly, I did exist, but by then, I was no longer the quiet, invisible daughter who waited for their attention. I was someone else entirely. Residency was grueling, but nothing compared to what I had already endured. Long shifts, emergency calls, sleepless nights, those were familiar to me. But this time, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I thrived in the chaos of the hospital. I loved diagnosing tough cases, talking patients through their fears, and standing beside surgeons in the OR. I was no longer the girl chasing approval, I was a doctor in my own right. When I completed my residency, I accepted a position with a respected hospital in downtown Chicago. A year later, with savings, a business loan, and more courage than I realized I had, I opened my own clinic near Hyde Park, Carter Health Wellness. Walking into that space the day we opened, white walls, gleaming floors, my name etched in bronze on the door, it felt like breathing after years underwater. For the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was living, I bought a condo overlooking Lake Michigan. Sleek. Modern. Quiet. I decorated it myself, white walls, soft blues, and framed photographs of cities I wanted to visit. No family photos. None of the past. Just me and the life I built. My phone rarely rang. And when it did, it wasn't from anyone I had grown up with. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself that silence was better than disappointment. That I didn't need anyone, but sometimes, late at night, I'd stare out at the lake and wonder what it might have felt like to be truly celebrated by the people who raised me. To have my name spoken with pride, not indifference. To be asked about my day, not just when I was needed. I never called them. Never visited. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, they didn't either. Still, I wasn't angry, not in the loud, bitter way I used to be. The pain was quieter now. Sharper, maybe. But buried deep beneath the pride of what I'd accomplished on my own. Then, one night, the phone rang, a voice I hadn't heard in 7 years trembled on the other end, and just like that, the past came crashing back into my life. It was a quiet Friday night. I had just finished reviewing patient files and was pouring a glass of wine when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. These days, that usually meant spam, but something made me answer. Hello? There was a long pause, then a voice, cracked, tired, hesitant. Maya. It's Mom. I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard her. I hadn't heard that voice in over 7 years. Not since I left for Northwestern. Not since the silence became normal. She sounded older. Smaller somehow. Jordan's not doing well, she said quietly. He's drinking more. Lost his job. He's sick, Maya. And your dad. He's not himself either. We don't know what to do. My first instinct was to hang up. Where was this concern when I was collapsing in the library from exhaustion? Where was this urgency when I had begged them for help? All those nights I cried myself to sleep in a freezing dorm room. Alone, forgotten, but then I heard something else in her voice. Not just worry, desperation, and guilt. A lifetime of emotions churned inside me: anger, grief, disbelief, pity. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. We need help, she said, barely above a whisper. I could have said no. I had every right to, but something in me needed to see them again, not for closure, not for forgiveness. Just to look them in the eye and know, once and for all, that I had made it through without them. I'll come tomorrow, I said flatly, and for the first time in years, I drove back to the place where I had once been invisible. The old apartment on the south side hadn't changed much. The brick exterior was chipped and tired. The hallway smelled like old grease and mildew, and the same third step on the staircase creaked under my weight just like it used to. But as I pushed open the door to apartment 2B, what I saw stopped me cold. The space felt smaller, dimmer, worn down by time and poor choices. The furniture sagged with age. Takeout containers cluttered the table. A faint staleness hung in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of cheap beer. Jordan was on the couch, slumped, hollow, barely recognizable. His hair was greasy, eyes sunken and vacant. A half-empty bottle sat on the floor beside him, and for a moment, I wondered if he even knew I was there. My mother looked older than her years. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrung them together. My father sat hunched in a recliner, thinner than I remembered, staring blankly at the TV. None of them said anything at first. I set the groceries on the counter. Paid their overdue rent without a word. Left a check for the hospital bills on the table. It wasn't forgiveness. It was responsibility. A sense of closure, maybe. I couldn't walk away without doing something, but I didn't stay long. As I turned to leave, my dad stood slowly. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. His voice cracked when he spoke. You're a good daughter, Maya. We didn't see it then. I paused at the door. I wanted to let it go. To just walk out and leave the past behind, but I couldn't, not without saying what I had carried for so long. I turned to him. Calm. Firm, no. You saw it, I said. You just didn't value it. His eyes fell to the floor. My mother looked like she might cry. I didn't wait for a reply. I stepped into the hallway, pulled the door shut behind me, and walked down the stairs. There were no fireworks. No apology. No dramatic reunion, just silence, and finally, clarity. They hadn't changed, but I had. It's been a few months since I walked out of that apartment. They haven't called since. I haven't reached out either. Sometimes, I wonder if they still sit in that dim living room, pretending everything will get better if they just wait long enough. If they still speak Jordan's name with hope. If they ever speak mine, but most days, I don't think about them at all. I focus on my clinic, on the patients who thank me, who see me. I spend my mornings walking by the lake, coffee in hand, breathing in the peace I fought for. I travel. I laugh. I surround myself with people who don't need a DNA test to respect me. Sometimes people ask me about my family. I just say, it's complicated, and leave it at that, because it is. There's a part of me that still aches, for the childhood I never got, for the hugs I never received, for the applause I never heard when I earned it most. But I've also realized something. I was never the problem. I was never invisible. They just refused to look, and now I shine so brightly, they can't ignore me even if they try. But the difference is, I no longer need them to see me. Revenge didn't come in loud words or slammed doors. It didn't come from proving them wrong. It came from building a life they were never part of, a life so full, so rich, so entirely mine. They reached out when they had nothing left, when their golden boy crumbled and their pride turned to dust, and yes, I helped. Because I'm better than what they were to me, but I walked away again. This time, with my head high, and this time, for good. Please share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you have a similar experience, let us know by sharing on the comment